right. So next, we are going to be speaking with Access Consciousness Certified Facilitator, Marilyn Bradford. So welcome to International Book Day, Marilyn.
Thank you, Julia. So glad to be here.
Oh, so glad to have you here. I love talking to you, and I love talking about right recovery because I just think that the world needs a very different way of looking at addiction and recovery. So thank you for being here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your background and how your book, Right Recovery for You, came to be?
Sure. I can't even remember how long ago it was. But anyway, I was having a marriage breakup and I was diagnosed as depressive and addicted to alcohol. And I was seeing a therapist and all of this and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he recommended that I go to This Reality's traditional treatment program, which I did. And I was in that for 17 years and I did it. And
wow, 17 years of traditional AA is a lot of
that's
years.
a lot. And the whole time I was going, seriously? There's got to be something else. There's just got to be something else. I mean, I did everything I was supposed to do. I did the steps. I sponsored people. I had sponsors and I went to meetings and all of this kind of thing. And my therapist said, because I wanted to change jobs, I was getting this divorce. He said, I think you'd be a good therapist. I was like, really? Okay. He says, I want you to go back to graduate school. And he really helped me out because he had been a favorite at the graduate school and I'd way past the date of application. But, he got me in and I specialized in addiction and then worked at a psychiatric hospital. And I interned at the Menninger Clinic, which is like the Mayo Clinic for mental health in America.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I became a psychotherapist and eventually in private practice with a specialty in addiction. And I wasn't really looking for access. A friend of mine had joined in. They lived in Santa Barbara. They'd gone on hikes with Dane and done this and that. And she let me listen to that. Those days, that long ago, we were on cassette tapes and Walkmans.
I love it. Wow. What year was that?
I can't even, 2000 and must have been 2005 going into 2006 because 2006 was my first access class.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, when did I go from my cassette Walkman to my CD disc Walkman,
Right.
I'm like, when did that happen?
But anyway, I was listening to all these tapes with Gary and I finally said to my friend, I have got to meet Gary. And she said, well, you haven't even done, at that time, Bars and Foundation were together. She said, you haven't even done Bars Foundation. I'm like, I know. So what? She was like, wait a minute. The first body class is in 3 weeks in California. And I'm like, I'm going. That's it. Put it on my charge card. So I went.
The first ever body class?
First ever body class.
Oh, Marilyn.
I know. I got in on the ground floor, sort of, not like Simone and Dane, but anyway, it was a great, I'm like, I never looked back. And I started using the access tools for myself. And then I started using the access tools on my clients. By that time, I was in private practice. And I said, Gary, my clients are getting better with the access tools than they are with psychotherapy tools.
Marilyn.
It is true.
I mean, that's a big statement.
It was a big thing. And it wasn't something I was like, I need a new way. It was just like, wow, this is amazing. I said, can we create something with access and addiction? And he's like, yeah, sure. And at that point, there was one right class, right body for you. I said, can we call it Right Recovery for You? And he said, yeah, I think I'll do a bunch of right classes. So that's how the right classes were born. Yeah. So I started using these tools, making some notes, looking for different ways to actually be with the topic of addiction. Like what's What's crazy about this reality's, what's not crazy about this reality's view of addiction and recovery? And eventually he's like, you have to write a book. Because I was talking to Gary all the time about this. And so I did. So I wrote Right Recovery for You, which is really a fairly radical paradigm shift, actually very radical paradigm
Marilyn, it's radical and I love it. And you're radical.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, one of the main premises of the book and the work of Right Recovery for You is that addiction is not a wrongness.
Exactly. It's definitely not a wrongness. Although it comes from, for most people, a sense of trying to get out of having made themselves so wrong. And it usually starts very early on with the family. And it's not even necessarily that your family meant to make you wrong or mean or anything like that. They're like, as Maxwell's, this is how we see the world. This is how we do religion. These are women's roles. These are men's roles. This is how you operate in society. These are the jobs open to you. And a lot of people are going, what? It's like, it makes no sense whatsoever. But what happens is people end up making themselves so wrong. I don't fit in. I don't know what to do. I remember sitting in my car not my car, but the family car when I was 4 years old, going, I think I made a mistake coming in.
How many of you listening have felt like that?
And
that's hilarious.
Of course, I started early with addictions to sugar. So what's an addiction? It's an energy looking for a target, and it's an energy of basically finding someone or something, a behavior, a substance outside of yourself, so you can kind of absent yourself and not feel that pain of being so wrong, which actually one of the things I discovered about second year into doing Right Recovery is what we think of as actual addictions, like drug addictions, alcoholism, being a winner, making money, trauma, drama, are actually secondary addictions. And the primary addiction is to judgment and the wrongness of self. And it's one of the reasons that people relapse so often traditionally, is because if that wrongness is not addressed, that pain is so great, you'll go back to using again, whatever it is.
Totally.
Yeah,
Like,
perfection, whatever. Yeah.
These are, I don't mean to make the energy significant, but we go through stuff as kids and things show up and they can be, I mean, there's a very big spectrum, but life can be really hard and really dark and really shameful and really regretful and deeply ugly. And it's like, when you look at addiction, it's like, okay, there's a coping mechanism.
Exactly.
How can that be made into a wrongness? How can a coping mechanism for that level of darkness and shame be made wrong?
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting because alcohol and drugs tend to be made wrong. Some addictions tend to be made right, like to making money, being the perfect mother. And in a way, they're more damaging, fitting in everywhere. Yeah, because people don't realize that they have them, but they're not being present. Addiction is basically a denial of being. And for me, recovery is an embracing of your being and your uniqueness. Does that make sense, Julia?
Yeah.
I've never quite put it right.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I just love it. And I've been watching, I don't know if you've watched this, Marilyn, but if you haven't, I think you'll get a real kick out of it. There's a show called Louder Milk.
No, I'm going to write it down because I'll forget.
Yes, write it down because it's a comedy, a very, very heartful, impactful comedy about an AA group. And the characters, it's about how the AA group comes together and they're different characters, and it's a different take on addiction, and it kind of gives you the nuances of how different we all are and how different we all think, and then in this show how addiction plays into that, and how these men are and one woman are working on their recovery. But I love this show. Anthony, my husband, who you know, Marilyn, but my husband and I watched it like back to back to back to back. And it's just, I don't know, there's just such a different, like, just, I don't know, everybody deserves dignity. Everybody deserves a chance at recovery. And like, we do, but we can't make ourselves wrong for the things that we've done, the things that we've said, the things that we've gone through, the shame that we feel. Of course we do, but it's like, I'm just so grateful that we have these really, as you said, and I love that. I think I'm going to start referring to it as these radical tools to recovery.
And I just want to stop you 1 minute, because there's such a difference between traditional recovery and recovery in Right Recovery for You and Access. In traditional recovery, it's about stopping something always.
And that's what the TV show is about. That's one part of the TV show is it doesn't work. But
clearly, if you're doing something that's harmful to you and your body, you should stop it. But if recovery stops there, you never get you back. Because the other thing about AA, and AA is absolutely correct for some people, is it's based on you being wrong.
Yeah.
And Right Recovery for You is based on you being amazing. You just haven't rediscovered it yet and created it. And that's a really big difference.
Yes, it is.
You know,
it truly, truly is. And so I want to ask you about something. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic.
No. Well, let me actually
talk about that
way.
How that may be a lie.
Yeah, there are people who actually have an allergy to alcohol. Not nearly all of the people who go to AA have an allergy to alcohol. Turned out I didn't. But those people can't drink. And if you have an allergy to peanuts, you can't be around peanuts. But you don't call yourself a peanutaholic.
Right.
So there are people who really can't drink, just as though there are people who are allergic to bee stings and have to carry that, but I can't remember what that's called.
EpiPen.
Have to carry an EpiPen with them. A lot of people have used alcohol as well as drugs and other things because that's what they just went to escape that pain of being wrong and that confusion of what this reality is. And then they become dependent on it, and they become dependent on the idea, not necessarily chemically dependent. I don't do a lot with drug addicts because it's a lot with chemistry, and that's not something that interests me. But energetically, if your family is addiction oriented, and it does not have to be alcohol or drugs, you pick up that energy and you learn not to be present, and you learn that when things are tough, you go to something outside of you because you're not complete. And it's too dangerous to be present. And that's very different from once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. There are many, many people in Access who've just quit drinking, quit doing drugs, quit all kinds of things. Oh, this isn't who I am. This isn't who I desire to be.
Wow. Thank you for explaining the nuances of that, because it is a very nuanced conversation. There's a very big difference between, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, the addiction to alcohol, and using addiction to, shy away from the greatness of you. And so thank you for explaining that. I think that that's something that each person listening to this can walk away with and remember that delineation, I guess you would say.
Well, and the big difference, another huge difference, is traditional treatment is based on a structure that's imposed on you. It's an answer to your problem. Right recovery, as with access, is based on the question. I mean, people would come in and say to my private practice and say, I'm an alcoholic. And I'd say, well, how do you know? You know, or whatever it was. I'm depressed. How do you know? What's up for you? And we would.
Can you imagine, Marilyn? They've been around the block and they've already decided what's going on. Yeah. And there's Marilyn empowering them. Well, how do you know? I mean, their head just must spin around.
Sometimes it does, pretty much.
That's so fun. What a gift.
And they start asking questions and find out. I mean, as I said, AA is really perfect for some people, and people who want a strong structure, want to be a follower, want someone to tell them, want to have the solution outside of them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you're never going to get to your being through that.
Wow. You're never going to get to your being through that.
Yeah. Because being only comes from empowering yourself and asking questions and that willingness to take that next step and go into the unknown.
That's so true. Wow. I mean, I watched a friend of mine in Access, and he was extremely addicted to drugs, and he came to Access, and I think kind of tried to hide that, and then kind of had or maybe was sober for a bit, and then had a major relapse, and then and now, I don't know, he's been clean maybe 3 or 4 years. He just made a choice one day, and it shows up different for everybody. I'm not saying this is every person's journey, but he just made a choice. He's like, this isn't me. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be addicted. I don't need this. I have tools for something different. And the way that he is creating his life is just a sight to see. And watching maybe for the 8 years that I've known him, from the relapse and, not knowing if he was going to ever come back from that, if he was going to go away completely. And then to watch somebody have these tools and just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm ready. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to have me.
I love those stories. And that they happen repeatedly with Access. Access is like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it is so nourishing and nurturing because it acknowledges people. It acknowledges their being, their uniqueness, their capacity to change and be greater. So it is a great, I don't want to say foundation because that's very stable and fixed, but it is sort of whatever it is, an atmosphere, an environment where people can choose not be judged. And that's another thing about right recovery. Take the judgment out of it. Mm-hmm. This reality is all about judging. You judging you, other people judging you, telling you what's right, telling you what's wrong. Access and right recovery are about, well, so now what? What would you like to choose? What's up? What? Me? Know something? Yes. Empowering you to know that you know. The tagline of Access. Yeah.
That is so awesome. I think that watching this show, Louder Milk, Marilyn, I cannot wait to talk to you after you watch this show. It's just a blast. And I don't know, seeing the way that world functions, and then just thinking about how different things can be with consciousness, with access tools, with Marilyn or whoever, other facilitators being like, hey, so how do you know you are addicted? Well, what's wrong with it? What's wrong? Like, are you just coping, or, whatever questions, you have. It's so different. So with right recovery, I mean, what are some of the things that you like do you have any stories about people that you've worked with and just their change of heart and what has become basically how they used right recovery to change their life?
Well, a lot of it is with allowance for themselves and gratitude. So I
Mhm.
had I have a lot of stories. If you
I
want
know
stories,
you
I
do.
got stories. I had a client who came in. This was years and years and years ago, and I still talk with him occasionally. He said, "Well, I can't do many sessions because I'm a cocaine addict, and I spent $100,000 on cocaine." And I'm like, "Okay, well, it's fine. We'll work with whatever you got."
Yeah.
So he started telling me. So I said, "What do you love to do?" He's like, "What?" I said, "What do you love to do? What really lights you up?" He said, "Well, I love photography and all forms of art." I said, "Okay, when was the last time you did any of that?" And he said, "Oh, well, I don't allow myself to do that because I'm $100,000 in debt with cocaine." Okay, so all right. So here's your I had homework, home play. I want you to go out and you don't have to buy expensive stuff, but buy the basics for creating art and photography and indulge yourself this whole week and come back and see me next week. He was a changed person because he got that he didn't have to punish himself and that he could have this outlet. And we went on from there, and he doesn't use cocaine anymore, you know. It's just like anything that you can do, particularly in the beginning, to introduce you're not wrong and what lights you up. So he's a different kind of story. I had a
I
woman,
love that one. I've never heard that one.
yeah, who came in and said, well, and she'd been sober, I don't know, I don't remember really, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
This was in Austin, Texas, which is a big Tex-Mex. She says, well, I'm going out for Tex-Mex food and I'm really concerned. I'm like, why? She said, because I always have margaritas with Tex-Mex. I haven't allowed myself to go out for Tex-Mex because I'm afraid. I'm like, what are you afraid of? Well, I'll drink margaritas. Okay. Okay. So here's your assignment. Go have Tex-Mex with your friends, order a margarita, and drink it consciously. Pick it up, smell it, allow yourself to taste it, put it down, notice how your body feels. I went a little bit more what to do. She said, really? I'm like, uh-huh. She came back the next week and I said, well, how was it? She said, well, I discovered I don't even like margaritas. But this whole story about it. And that's what we do.
Oh my God. Never in the history of normal recovery has any psychotherapist ever said, go try the drink consciously.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. And from her doing it slowly, consciously,
Mhm.
with awareness, she actually came to the realization that she didn't even like it.
And she empowered herself with that.
Huge.
Yeah, hugely empowered herself.
Wow.
And
That is.
another one that's going to sound really odd to people, but Access has this tool. Who does this belong to?
Mhm.
I had a client, I think she was in her 20s. She came in, and she worked with me. She said, I'm an alcoholic. I mean, she worked with me for like 6 weeks. And I knew she desired to change. And that's a whole nother topic. But
Mm.
you don't come to me with a desire to change and don't change in 6 weeks. It just doesn't happen.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I finally said to her, whose alcoholism is it anyway? And she said, oh, it's my mother's. And she never had another problem with alcohol. So I love that story.
I do too. That's amazing. Like, so can you kind of just dive into that a little bit about um maybe the behavior, the addiction belongs to somebody else and you've been living out somebody else's addiction.
Well, how much do we live out are, particularly for women, and I think it happens for men too, although I haven't seen it quite as much. How much do we live out our mother's patterns, habits, ways of speaking, ways of parenting, ways of dealing with money, all of those things. But then we don't get that we could also live out their addiction. It's not yours. None of those patterns and habits and behaviors are actually yours. But we learn as a young child, in this case, a young girl, that's our role model. So we learn to take it on.
Wow. So it's almost like it's like the margarita story. That woman, in the second that she got present and aware of the fact that she doesn't even like margaritas, she didn't even have an addiction to margaritas. She didn't even like them.
Right.
It's the same in that moment. That other person realized as soon as she became aware, it's my mom's addiction. She was released of it. So it's the essence behind both of those stories is awareness.
Awareness. And your point of view creates your reality. You know, if you think you're an alcoholic, and if you identify as one, I always tell my clients, never identify, I'm an overeater, I'm a gambler, because then you have to act it out until someone or something interrupts that. And what happened, and the best thing to interrupt that is to have an experience or have someone ask you a question that interrupts it. Like the margarita experience, or when I asked her, whose addiction is that anyway? Whose parenting style is that anyway? Whose ideas about money is that anyway? Oh, that's my mother's.
Wow. That's amazing. That's something that Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, has really taught me with parenting, because he's basically taught me to start asking Aria, who's my 15-year-old teenage stepdaughter, you know her, Marilyn. You know, I'm like, I do harsh with her sometimes, you know? And he's like, harsh never works. It never creates. And he said, you've got to just peacefully ask her, what is that choice that you're making creating? Not what's that choice creating? Like, okay, like you were, you know, harsh with your dad, you know, like, so like, what did that create? What did that create in his world? What did that create in your world? And then I watch her and she looks at it and she goes, and she comes off it completely. It's incredible. It's an unbelievable. I'm like, I have extreme control over my teenage daughter. Who feels like they have extreme control over their teenage daughter? Nobody, but I do, because I have the power of the question. The other day we were going for a hike and I said, your spring break is 9 days. I want to spend only 5 hours of it with you. And we're going on this hike, whether you like it or not. And in the morning, she was like all grumpy. And so I just asked her, I said, are you punishing me for making you go on this hike? And then she looked at it. She went back to eating her breakfast. And then 3 or 4 minutes later, she came up to me and gave me a big hug out of nowhere. And we had the coolest day. We had such a blast hiking, going out to eat, getting Starbucks. We had so much fun. But you know, her desire was to punish me for making her go on the hike. And when I asked her about it, she went in her own world, I don't really actually want to punish Julia, you know? So it's like asking a question of somebody creates such
awareness.
Such a change in their world, and allows them to be such a pattern interrupt.
And the other thing is it allows them, encourages them, and really demands of them to be present. And that's another thing that
I didn't realize I was doing that with Aria.
This reality never desires us to be present, because when you're present, you're not controllable. You're in charge of your choices. And addiction is all about not being present. So you're controlled by everybody's judgment of you. You're controlled by having to be perfect, or this reality, or belonging, or trauma, drama, or whatever it is. when you come back to being you and know that you don't have to be controlled by anyone or anything outside of you, that's a very different space. You can be really present, begin to create and celebrate you and be the being you truly be.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk to me. This was fun.
Thank you, Julia. Always fun to talk with you.
Oh man, do we have fun. Oh, awesome. Well, how does it get better? And for those of you out there watching, Marilyn is an amazing facilitator, and you can take private sessions with her, classes. Her website is up here on the page, marilynbradford.com, and you can purchase her book, Right Recovery from You. And if you want 10% off, you can do that today with our cool sale that we have with Access
Cool. I didn't
Consciousness.
even know that.
Yeah, the Access Consciousness Publishing is going to come on today and actually talk about the publishing process, which I'm excited about. And they also are giving 10% off for so people can order the books today.
That's great. Oh, and it does come in French, Italian, German, and Spanish.
Awesome. French, Italian, German, and Spanish. Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I had it written down to say that, but I forgot. So that's great. I'm glad you did. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Marilyn, and we'll chat with you soon.
Sounds good.
Okay. Bye.